experience is not arising out of the split into subject and object, even if we hear that at times being suggested. What is rather suggested here is that it is for the sake of experience that the so-called split into subject and object is designed in the first place. And then, if we are only to speak about it in terms of split into subject and object, we are not doing justice to the energy, or the power rather, the power that is here responsible for that creative tension. So the first question actually goes straight to what we spoke just now, fittingly enough. It's given tentative title, The Dynamics of Experiencing. It comes from Wilma Pascoe. I am hoping I'm pronouncing the name correctly. There's a very short background. One outcome of the repeated listenings, besides allowing the beautiful environment to set the scene, as it were, is that many of my questions have been answered naturally over these months, as new insights have arisen. So much of it really struck a chord with me at the deepest level of the heart, allowing me to do a fair bit of dot joining and to progress greatly. And here are two questions. Could it be said that the experiencing arises from pure potentiality at the moment of the split into subject and object, then withdraws back into pure potentiality as the mind withdraws and therefore takes place only when there is subject-object? And the second question, along the same lines, would the trajectory be from pure potentiality, then subject-object followed by perception, by the senses, then into the mind? In other words, linear? Does the trajectory, the outward movement, always reach the mind before it subsides, or can it be partial? I'd guess that it can be, just as an inward or outward breath can be cut short as the body-mind responds to circumstances. So the first, or rather response to the first question with regard to the, could it be said that experiencing arises from pure potentiality at the moment of split into subject and object, then withdraws back into pure potentiality as the mind withdraws and therefore takes place only when there is subject-object? What I feel is perhaps very fitting, and this is a good question that we can go over this again. I don't want us to end up with a limited understanding that experience is only in relation to the working of the mind, because there are many examples when the mind goes blank but the experience continues. So this, by the way, debunks that notion that it's all in the mind, even if a fitting, at times, reminder used as an intermediary, let's say, tool, as an intermediary reminder of sorts. And you remember I was giving the experiences that are known in deep sleep, or the experiences in the samadhi. In the samadhi, there is nothing, there is no objects left. In the samadhi, there is no objects left which would require for the mind's activity. Mind is fully subsided. In other words, every one of you, everyone who has meditated long enough knows that experience when mind simply settles down. And yet that doesn't end experiencing. Experience continues. Another quality of experience begins. from there, ensues from there. But what I want to point out your attention here is that perhaps the most important thing here is that what this question brings or affords as a possibility is to adjust something in our understanding. Experience is not arising out of the split into subject and object, even if we hear that at times being suggested. What is rather suggested here is that it is for the sake of experience that the so-called split into subject and object is designed in the first place. And then, if we are only to speak about it in terms of split into subject and object, we are not doing justice to the energy, or the power rather, the power that is here responsible for that creative tension. So therefore it's a trinity. Otherwise, if we begin to speak about it in terms of subject-object modalities only, we discard the most important, as it were, force that in the first place creates the possibility for subject experiencing object, or as we have often put, subject recognizing itself in the object, or subject recognizes itself in objectivity of its own experience. Variety of takes we can give here in terms of what language affords, but it's always three. You see? So the split into subject and object, in a way, is a kind of reductionistic way of speaking about this, even if we do at times. What in fact takes place, certainly from the perspective of Tantric Shaivism, that Kashmir Shaivism, is that the experience is made out of these indestructible modalities. These modalities are always at place there. The modalities known as, let's say, in terms of pure, I don't even want to call it templates, let's just, call them what they are, right? Pure tattva, Shiva, as awareness, the power, and it is through the agency of that power that awareness, pure subjectivity, undergoes this flip, if you will, where that power creates this out of its own accord, a possibility for recognizing itself in the experiencing of the object. Of course, it's mind-bending, mind-boggling. It's kind of like on a daily basis, one can reflect on that occasionally, but it's not something one can carry with oneself all the time. And that is not required. It happens either spontaneously, as an outcome of expansion of consciousness, or one simply steeps gradually in this understanding over a period of time. Over a period of time, one reflects on this enough to have this understanding that whatever one perceives, whatever one sees, hears, touches, experiences, is on the account of innate recognition of one's own subjectivity in the experiencing of an object. So you see, it's not the split into subject and object. It's the power of Shakti here, Shakti as the power that brings about that possibility. And this is like speaking in Tantric terms, using that more of a Tantric analogy here. So this is what I felt like making that important adjustment so into the way the question goes itself here. So what is also of value to mention here, in relation to what the suggestion here in the question, that then after that split, which, as the questioner goes, which gives the rise to experience, then it withdraws back into pure potentiality as the mind withdraws and therefore takes place only when there is subject and object. What I'm suggesting here is something else. Is that there is always the modality of seeing and seen. Always. What happens though is in that modality of seeing and seen, when subjectivity takes over, in other words, when the driver finds himself, herself in their own seat, then everything falls into place, as it were. So this, what prior to that caused the loss of one's own subjectivity because it was misplaced, the object of experiencing took over, it took precedent. And then identification with an object of experience, this is also, aka, an embodied experience. This is where the identity is solely on this body. And in a state of avidya, in a state of ignorance, that identity costs us, literally, freedom. But in a state of realization, in a state of, let's say, recognition, when that takes place, even the relationship to the body undergoes change. The body no longer seen as something erroneous to identify with, because the body is understood to be the body of Shiva, just as every other experience, every other objective experience without which there is no fun. So we can speak about it in a variety of ways. However, what the questioner here brings out into the open gives us also another opportunity to revisit that analogy, that beautiful analogy of the dance on the stage. That analogy that is given by great tantrikas of the past and given by certainly some iconical figures, that the nature of experience has this, what could be compared to a dancer coming on the stage, performing this, whatever that is to be performed, and then when performance is over, she bows and off the stage and the curtain is drawn. So this analogy, this, I think it was given by Ksemaraja in some of his expositions, gives this perfect example of the nature of every experience. So in other words, every experience has this dancer coming onto the stage, peak of the performance as she leads us, and where experience subsides because we've reached that point of whatever that is, catharsis, exegesis, the point of the peak of that is then winds itself down and bows itself off the stage and the performance is over. This takes place absolutely with everything at all times. So this analogy is given just as that poetic metaphor. But that experience of the dance on the stage is what every experience is made of, if only we pay attention. Everything undergoes that. Whether it's a minute experience of something, right? I'm hungry, I'm going to go and put a toast, and perform the whole action, and have some snack. Whether I conceive some major idea that's about to be brought to manifestation, like Elon Musk with, program of going to Mars or taking over the Twitter or something, whatever that is, from minute, so seemingly insignificant action to something which seems grandiose, extraordinary, this is always intact. So it is for you to reflect on this in your own terms now, what happens in terms of the withdrawal. But my job was to just simply tweak that understanding that It is not that experience is a result of split into subject and object. I would like you to see, I would like us to kind of maybe upgrade this understanding to this being a fully conscious affair. So in other words, it is for the sake of experience that the trinity, the modality of the three, as the seer, seeing, and seen, comes forth, which is also the expression of will, knowledge, and action, as we speak at the emergence repeatedly, because will here represents the ultimate will of the Creator, the will of awareness, will of Shiva. The knowledge here is represented by the power of Shakti. It's the knowledge here, the Chit Shakti, the power of knowledge, the power of knowing, and action. Action is the result of all this. So this experience of individuality, however intense, however bewildering, however ignorant, is in fact a part and parcel of how awareness displays its own power to conceal itself in the world of its own objective experience. You see? So it's a rehabilitation of what Nara, or individual experience, here stands for. And it's very important if you reflect on this, because we overcome, I don't know, decades, maybe longer, of that predicament of trying to pin down the trying to catch the thief, you know, trying to catch the one who stole the whole thing from us. You know, who is that? The mind, the ego, and the search goes on. Whereas in fact, everything is beautifully orchestrated here. So it's a different, completely platform of understanding to work with. So, and I think this kind of answers also the second part of the question: would the trajectory be from pure potentiality, then subject, object, followed by perception by the senses, then into the mind, and other words, linear? So the question mark is it linear or not? Well, this is for you to reflect. Is it linear? So in other words, that borrowing the physics, sunlight, quantum physics that is, sunlight displays the qualities of waves and particles simultaneously. This is the most important discovery that Albert Einstein attributed to himself, more than what he is known for. He was particularly impressed with this stumbling. The sunlight at once displays itself as waves and particles. You see? So in other words, that is the quantum realm of understanding. So one can view one's body, as I was trying to explain to our 13-year-old son, nearly, he's 12, will be 13, when this conversation was, in fact, just a matter of days ago. I thought how to explain to our boy the very basic principles of the quantum physics. And of course, the double slit experiment would be the most obvious thing to do, because that's what it is, that's how it's done. So, but after giving this example, the example with the sunlight displaying qualities of waves and particles, what was the most important and perhaps the most tangible is to say, so when this is how we relate to, let's say, ourselves as this embodiment. From one point of view, I'm made out of particles. From one point of view, I'm in fact is this something tangible, something that is made out of something particular. At the very same time, I'm also a field of energy. In other words, I'm waves, different waves, and we know that these waves can be measured. And it's not either or, it's simultaneously. I'm neither nor and all of it at once. And that's where we enter the quantum realm, and this is why I think spirituality and spiritual discourses have been so enriched, in many cases, this rehabilitated some of the perennial ancient teachings of the past because of the breakthroughs in quantum physics. So this is what I wanted to point out to your attention, that is it a linear process? From a certain point of view, it is. Linear process. Being born, right, the whole thing, and growing, the cells expanding, being bigger, growing in different dimension, growing emotionally, physically, mentally, psychologically, and then we turn that into another understanding, aging, right? Aging, maturing, aging, maturing. So there is this linearity. At the same time, our awareness, from the energetic even point of view, doesn't undergo changes, doesn't. In fact, we could even argue, this is very, very coveted topic here, is that a certain energetic quality of who we are and how we came into this world will never change. This is a kind of a stab into the kind of self-help industry and all the rest of it, because from Tantric point of understanding, certain fundamental qualities of our psyche cannot be changed, not because they're fixed somehow or molded, but because there are expressions of these very waves. You see? So we can change appearance and we can change this and that all the time. We can look younger, we can look older, we can look tired, we can look refreshed. We can behave in a variety of ways, right? Come across us. But fundamentally, nothing changes in that superstructure of who we are. Even I'm not even talking about at the level of unified field. I'm not talking about at the level of, let's say, Shivahood. I'm talking about this at the level of this, what constitutes here the field, the energetic field, which has its own signature, like. It has its own kind of quality, you see? And if you spend enough time with children, a prolonged enough time, so that you see how children grow, you can see that certain qualities in the child remain the same. Certain qualities of a character, certain qualities of their ways of being. And then, of course, we don't cease to discuss the linearity of the state of affairs. That, oh, so-and-so has changed so much. Oh, so-and-so. Yes, of course, that remains to be true as well. So, I'll leave it at that.